So this is Coach to Coach with Laura Vann-LaRusso, and my name, of course, is Dr. Keith McNally. We are live streaming on LinkedIn. It's
Yes.
4 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, so on the East Coast. Everywhere else, I'm not quite sure. Laura, welcome back for another episode, and thank you for joining me today. So last week, we really took a look at lifelong learning and its power in our lives. We focused a bit on coaching. Of course, this is Coach to Coach. Today, we're going to take a deeper dive into, Laura, why did you decide to
Mhm.
become a coach? Because you were not always a coach. You were at one time a school teacher, correct?
Yes,
And so
absolutely.
this is a different transition for you. Yeah.
Yes, it's a new world for me for sure. And it's a very good question. Well, I became a coach, honestly, as a result of the pandemic initially, right?
Okay.
Um, we all had to sort of reinvent ourselves and figure out how we can still be impactful. And then I really enjoyed coaching, right? So I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to keep this up. So why? Because coaching allows me to work in an environment where I really have the opportunity to establish that relationship with my clientele. It's much more personal, much more specific to their particular needs. And it's a greater opportunity to really understand the people that I'm serving and or empowering by
So,
improving their communication skills.
well, now I'm really curious because
Mhm.
you started something in the midst of worldwide chaos.
I know.
We talked about COVID-19 and the pandemic as really being a disruptor of lives. How could you have started a new venture in your life from such an experience?
Well, honestly, it was quite scary. I mean, it really initially it was not my original idea. I think
Okay.
like all of us, we were waiting to go back into the classroom. And I had been working for a workforce development center here in Brooklyn, New York. And I had lovely students and great attendance, and they're all looking to level up their skills so that they could obtain jobs and further their professional opportunities. And I thought, well, gee, like everyone else, well, gee, this pandemic will be over soon and then we'll all go back into the classroom.
Yeah.
But then it sort of progresses, much longer than we thought. And I said, well, I'm really going to have to think about a new way um, to reinvent myself.
Okay.
And so that's when I started to consider the idea of coaching in the first place.
Okay.
And then later that led to niche coaching, which I'll talk to you in a bit about, which is a
Well,
slight difference. Yeah.
well, let's talk about coaching first. So what attracted you to that industry? Because one, it's not so easy to kind of jump into. Two, you have to really have some type of background in something.
Sure.
And then three, by golly, we had to absorb technology more than we ever had before. And so you had some challenges ahead of you.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I'm still growing and learning in terms of the technology. I'm so proud of myself. I got a new ring light, for example. Wow. But that's okay. My personality has always been one of a lifelong learner, as we talked about last week. So that's number one. And how I got I sort of jumped into the pool initially,
You
very
did, you jumped in
hesitant.
waist deep.
Yeah, hesitantly. Well, first of all, out of need, frankly. I
Okay.
mean, my family needs to eat, we have bills to pay. Yes, of course, there's that personal. But then the other aspect of it was my clients that I started out with needed a lot of reassurance that everything was going to be okay. We were all terrified. We were all very scared and traumatized.
Mm.
And in assuring each other and being there for each other in a consistent way online, I was able to act as a positive influence for them and a sense of security. I was able to provide security for them because that intimate relationship of coaching allows you to really get to know the person. You're turning your computer on and someone is drinking their coffee with you, or or someone is telling you about the bad morning they had, or even the rough evening they've had. And that personal touch, along with the academic support in terms of communication coaching, it seemed to be a good mesh, good mix. And that's why I wanted to continue in this environment, as scary as it was.
Well, I can imagine. And so
Yeah.
we're all in a bit of a transition, especially, during the pandemic era. But you had, once you decided that this was going to be your next mission in life, what was your focus? How did you focus in on, I'm going to help a specific type of people, or I'm going to help solve a specific problem? What does that mean to you?
Well, I tried to think about, what do I bring to the table? There are a million coaches out here, especially on LinkedIn. There's a coach for just about anything you could possibly imagine.
And there probably should be.
And thank goodness for that. True, absolutely. But in terms of what I have to offer, how can I possibly distinguish myself from a traditional English as a second language coach? Because that is my professional training as an ESL educator.
Okay.
And I thought, well, I need to get more specific. And that led to me thinking about my experiences as a woman with a physical disability.
Hmm.
And it led to my reflecting on those clients that I served when I wasn't even an educator, when I was an advocate, and I saw their experiences of unconscious bias and deliberate bias, of not being allowed access to certain information because of lack of translation, for example. And I said, gee, given my experience as an educator and my personal experience as a woman with a physical disability and the experience of an advocate, I think that I should go for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and see how I might be able to support those professionals to communicate more effectively.
So wait, I'm confused because you kept on iterating that you are a woman with a disability. So I can appreciate the advocacy.
Right.
Um, can you talk about that just a little bit?
Definitely. So the thing is this, I must tell you very quickly that in my upbringing, although it was 200 years ago, no, only just joking, my upbringing was way before the Americans with Disabilities Act, right? So the accommodation and the mindset is that I didn't even know what I was entitled to, or what I was even could think about asking for in terms of an accommodation, right?
Okay.
And that could be a negative, but in some ways, I don't want all the other advocates to come get me, but in some ways it was slightly a positive. Because why? Because I never really thought that I couldn't join the mainstream, that I couldn't go into an educational institution and be the only person with a physical disability. I
Hmm.
never thought that door was not open to me. I just said, well, I want to be a teacher. I'm going to get my master's and I'm going to be a teacher. The education part came from the reaction, not all the time, because I don't like pity, but the occasional reaction of the bias of the potential employer that I'd experienced on occasion,
Hmm.
and I'd also witnessed when I was an advocate acting on behalf of others, that they experienced.
So I come to you with not any of those experiences. So
Mhm.
from an emotional perspective, I can't relate. I can empathize,
Right.
but how do you draw on those experiences to connect at a deeper level with the people that you advocate for or that you want to coach?
Well, it's interesting because you would say to yourself, how would a person with a physical disability really be able to relate to a person who wants to improve their English communication skills because they're second language learners or third language learners?
Yeah, my thoughts
And
exactly.
yes, good question, an honest question. This is why. Because in developing these relationships with my professionals that I've helped, and with former students, even in the traditional school classroom, they have confided in me. And because we have a relationship, they have confided in me similar feelings of being discriminated against and not necessarily having the confidence to supersede that, to overcome that in a positive way. So for example, pardon me. So for example, I would have a student who would be terrified of public speaking because they're worried about their accent. And why are they worried about their accent? Because they're worried about being mocked or made fun of. That was in the high school.
Hmm.
This same skill transcended into the professional arena, where I've had lawyers, for example, lawyers, qualified lawyers with umpteen, certifications and qualifications, say, I absolutely know, absolutely have expertise, but my pacing and my accent makes me feel tentative and I feel intimidated. And so, because of what they perceive as bias or what they feel is an insecurity within themselves. So the commonality we share is that whether it's a disability or it's a language difference, or if it's a confidence issue, the thing that we share is being able to accept ourselves, to acknowledge that we do have our gifts, our talents, and that we just need the confidence to be able to express that. And as your language professional, I give my clients certain specific strategies to help them do that exactly, to stand and deliver, if that makes sense.
It does make perfect sense. And so I know we've talked before, and I've quite literally called you a confidence coach, as much as a holistic trainer. And
Mhm.
we always go back to the fact that you add confidence to your, I guess, your scope of expertise, because that is really, really necessary for, I think, anybody to kind of step up and even begin to think about, and again, begin to think about, not even making, but begin to think about making changes in their life. And so whether they feel intimidated or scared or fearful or whatever,
Mhm.
how do you help somebody, I guess, build up confidence to do something? Because I talk about in my context being given permission. I call myself a permissions coach, because sometimes we don't give ourselves permission because of some negative thinking, wherever that
Sure.
comes from. But until somebody else gives permission for us to do something, we're still stuck in our shelves. And I think for you, it's the same way, except
Yes.
I call it permission, you call it confidence.
Yes.
How do you teach somebody confidence?
Yeah. I kind of smile when you share this with me because I think that we really complement one another, because in certain areas you're so much more confident and or brave. And in certain areas I feel like what I have that energy, that push, so together we're like quite a team. And I really enjoy that. How do you teach confidence? Well, remember last week we talked about CPR. Oh, those
I do. I love that acronym.
yeah, those annoying English teachers with their with their acronyms. But anyway, CPR, right? So okay, what is that? That is curious, problem solving, and reflective. So that's my way of introducing the idea of being confident. And it's also through the niche teaching. Niche teaching, first of all, there's the confidence piece. We have to be curious. Why are we not confident? Why are we nervous? What are we worried about? What is it that's intimidating?
Mhm.
For me, with the technology, it's, oh, gee, I hope the computer doesn't disconnect, or, oh, God, I hope the glare of my eyeglasses isn't too bad. Silly things like this that take so much away from your expertise. You have to learn to let that go. You have to be curious about what's making you insecure, okay? And get it out in the open and talk about it with your coach. Then the other thing is problem solving. As a coach, I would then work with the client, have a conversation about why is 1, 2, 3, whatever the issue is for you, pacing, accent reduction, intimidation around technology. What is it that is a problem for you? And by the way, here is a strategy that you can consider using to address that problem. For pacing, you can learn to breathe a little bit. As a new teacher, yeah,
Okay.
as a new teacher, you can always spot a new teacher, because new teachers, they feel like they have to complete the whole lesson in one day, in that one period of time. And I remember I had a mentor who said, you don't have to finish the whole lesson in this one period. You can continue it into the next day. But new teachers say, oh, I gotta get done. You're too rushed. So we would talk about strategies for problem solving, and then reflection. Reflection would be perhaps an article or a TED talk or a diary entry about how the client felt about their experience in having this discussion, and then applying these strategies at work. How did it work out at that staff meeting when you tried to breathe a little more? Or how did it work in your presentation when you made sure to make eye contact, stand with confidence, and have not a laundry list of notes, but a few notes that you could refer to?
I like,
Um, that's it.
go ahead. I was going to say, I just love the CPR analogy and the acronym. I have yet to use it though. I said I was going to use it last week and I never did. I don't know if I will, but I definitely have it in the back of my mind. With the limited amount of time that we have left, are there any critical elements as a coach,
Mhm,
you, Coach
mhm.
Laura,
Yes.
would say to somebody who's wanting or thinking about hiring you for help?
The critical things that I want you to take away from this conversation, or from witnessing this conversation between Keith and myself, are that I'm a niche coach, which means I'm not going to waste your time as a general English instructor, right? You can think of me as a specialist. So if you are a DEI professional, for example, you are in charge of language that promotes more inclusive policies, more inclusive hiring practices. How do you communicate that to your staff? How do you communicate that to your funders, for example? How do you convince them that we are maybe not doing such a good job of hiring underrepresented populations, for example? Or what if you are in a staff meeting and you feel that there's some sort of a bias? How do you react to that bias? Because it might be unconscious, in a way that doesn't turn your listener off, that can get your audience, I was going to say people, your audience, to be open and not defensive and able to listen. What language skills do you need to be able to communicate effectively so that people are listening to you? So those are the takeaways. I'm a niche teacher. I specialize specifically for DEI folks, and the plan is individualized. So you come to me, we have a conversation, we determine what those barriers are using that CPR acronym, and I'm here to help and serve, and most importantly, I'm here to listen.
Laura, thank you so much. This has been another edition of Coach to Coach with Laura Vann-LaRusso and Dr. Keith McNally. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you, Keith.